I was fixing a fence post on my ranch when I heard tires screeching on gravel. Not county trucks. Not neighbors. Luxury SUVs. That's when I saw her, Karen Hollingsworth. She stormed out like she owned the dirt under my boots, waving a clipboard over her head and screaming, "This land is not yours. You need to pack up and leave today." I stood there, calm, holding my hammer, watching her point past my fences like she was auctioning off my life. She yelled again, louder, shriller, voice cracking with entitlement. "My son needs this land. You don't get to steal what belongs to families." Then she pulled out her phone and shouted something that made my jaw tighten. "I'm calling 911 right now. This man is trespassing on private property." Sirens echoed in the distance. She smirked like she'd already won. What she didn't know was that she wasn't calling the law on me. She was calling it to me. And the moment those cruisers turned onto my ranch road, everything she built her lives on started to collapse. My name is Marcus Cadwell. I'm in my 40s, and I've been the county sheriff here in Randall County, Texas, for just over 16 years. Most people around Palo Duro Canyon know me as the guy who keeps things quiet, handles cattle thefts, fence disputes, the occasional domestic call that gets out of hand. What most of them don't know is that when I'm not wearing the badge, I'm just another rancher trying to keep his land peaceful. 5 years ago, I bought my ranch on the eastern outskirts of Palo Duro Canyon. 48 acres of open pasture, old fencing, a modest house, and enough distance from town to let a man breathe. I didn't buy it as an investment. I bought it because land like this still means something to me. I raise cattle, keep a few horses, and spend more nights listening to coyotes and traffic. That morning started like any other. Sun barely over the canyon rim. Coffee cooling on the porch rail. Cattle moving slow through the dew. I wasn't in uniform. No hat, no badge. Just boots, jeans, and a fence that needed mending near the south line. That's when I saw her. Karen Hollingsworth didn't belong out there. You can tell when someone doesn't. She stood on the county road side of my fence like she was posing for a photo. Perfect posture. Clipboard held tight. Eyes scanning my land as if she were already rearranging it in her head. She was in her mid-50s, sharp features, short, messy blonde hair that looked styled to appear effortless. Light-colored business suit, expensive but aggressive in its own way. The kind of outfit people wear when they want to look official without earning it. She didn't greet me, didn't wave, didn't ask a question. She just said, loud enough to carry across the fence, "You need to leave this property immediately." I leaned on the fence and studied her for a second. Calm, curious, no reason to escalate. "Morning," I said. "You lost." Her mouth tightened. That answer irritated her. "I'm Karen Hollingsworth," she snapped. "President of the Canyon Ridge Estates HOA. This land is under active review, and you are trespassing." There it was. HOA language. Confident, rehearsed, completely detached from reality. "I think you got the wrong place," I said. "This ranch isn't part of any HOA." She laughed, short, dismissive. "Oh, it absolutely is," she replied. "Our legal team has already verified that. This area is slated for expansion, and frankly, you're in the way." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. I'd seen this type before. People who talk in conclusions instead of facts. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "I own this land. Deed recorded. Taxes paid." Her eyes flicked briefly to the fence, then back to me. "My son needs his property," she said, like that explained everything. "He's in a custody situation, and this ranch is exactly what the court will want to see. Stable environment, space, privacy." I almost smiled at that. Almost. "So let me be clear," she continued, tapping her clipboard. "If you don't vacate voluntarily, I'll involve law enforcement." That's when she pulled out her phone. She turned slightly away from me, just enough to perform for an invisible audience, and dialed. "Yes, 911, she said, voice suddenly softer, concerned. "I need deputies sent out. There's a man illegally occupying land controlled by our homeowners association. He's refusing to leave and making my family feel unsafe." I watched cattle shift behind me as she spoke. Calm animals. No chaos. Just a woman. lying smoothly into a phone. She added, "Yes, he's inside the fence. I believe he's trying to claim ownership that doesn't belong to him." She ended the call and looked at me like she'd already won. "Last chance," she said. "You can save yourself a lot of trouble." I leaned back against the fence post and crossed my arms. "Then we'll wait," I replied. She frowned. That wasn't the reaction she expected. We stood there in silence for several minutes, wind moving through the grass, a hawk circling high over the canyon edge. Karen checked her phone twice, clearly impatient. When the first cruiser appeared at the end of the road, her posture straightened instantly. Confidence flooded back into her expression like a switch had flipped. She pointed at me and said, loud and precise, "That's him." 2 cruisers, then a third. They parked neatly along the road, just like protocol. No lights, no sirens. Deputies stepped out. Calm, professional. Karen walked toward them immediately, already talking. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "This man is trespassing and refusing lawful orders. I want him removed." I stayed where I was, inside my fence, on my land. Deputy Collins looked at me, then back at her. "Sir," he said, neutral tone, "what's your name?" I took a breath. Still calm. "Marcus," I said. "This is my ranch." Karen scoffed. "That's not true," she snapped. "He's lying. Arrest him if you have to." I didn't correct her. Not yet, because sometimes the fastest way to end a lie is to let it finish talking. And standing there on that quiet Texas road, with my deputies looking back and forth between us, I knew this was only the beginning. The first night I noticed something was wrong. I spotted fresh tire tracks running across the east pasture. My heart sank. Whoever did this wasn't just careless. They were testing boundaries. At first, I thought it was some reckless teenagers, maybe joyriding after dark. I patched the fence, reinforced the posts, and tried to put out of my mind. But the next morning, Eddie came running out of the barn, panic in his eyes. The fence had been deliberately cut with wire cutters. Sections of the east pasture were flooded, and my irrigation lines were severed in 3 places. Diesel fuel from a nearby tractor tank had leaked into the water, mixing with mud and scaring the animals. My brother's PTSD flared at the sight, and I clenched my fists, silently swearing whoever did this was going to regret it. I immediately installed motion-activated trail cameras, infrared high definition, strategically placed near the fence line and barn. Within the first night, the cameras caught him, Trevor Worthington, rolling across the pasture on a red Yamaha ATV at 2:17 a.m., revving the engine, spooking the horses, and stop and take pictures of the barn and tool shed. My jaw tightened. This wasn't random vandalism. This was deliberate. Over the next few nights, Trevor returned, this time with surveying equipment, carefully measuring corners and marking boundaries with stakes. Every step screamed premeditation. Then Stella Worthington, the HOA president, got involved. She called 911, claiming I was illegally occupying property and that Trevor was being threatened. She spun her words like a seasoned manipulator, portrayed herself as a protective mother and me as an unreasonable squatter. I chuckled to myself. She had no idea she was calling the sheriff about the sheriff. Deputy Martinez arrived, young but sharp. I didn't even need to explain. I showed him the trail camera footage. Trevor trespassing, damage to the fences, irrigation compromised. He understood immediately. "This isn't your fault," he whispered, eyes wide. I nodded. I decided not to press charges immediately. I needed to watch and see how far they'd take this. A few days later, Stella herself came to the property. Designer heels clicking on the gravel, clipboard in hand. She cornered Eddie, assuming he was a ranch caretaker who would bend under pressure. I stepped forward, calm but firm. "This is our land," I said, tipping my cowboy hat. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she quickly masked it with a fake smile. She tried to negotiate, offering what she called a generous buyout. But I wasn't interested. Money wasn't the point. Protecting my brother, my animals, and my land was non-negotiable. "Your son needs this land for his kids," she said, leaning forward, voice sharp. You're standing in the way of a suitable home for children. I shook my head. You don't get to manipulate people with threats and lies. My brother needs peace, and I'm not letting anyone take it. If Trevor wants a home, he can buy one legally. He doesn't get to steal what isn't his. Stella's face went pale for a moment, frustration flashing in her eyes. You think you're untouchable, Sheriff? We can make this so difficult for you. You'll regret every day you refuse my offer. I studied her, knowing she had the resources to make trouble, but not the courage to face me head on. As she left, I turned to Eddie, whose hands were still trembling. Don't worry, brother, I said, putting an arm around him. We're not backing down. Let them make their moves. We'll be ready. And deep down, I knew they hadn't seen the last of me. Stella and Trevor had underestimated who I was, and I was about to show them exactly what that meant. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of clucking chickens and the soft rustle of the wind through the pastures. I grabbed my coffee mug and walked outside, surveying the ranch. Everything seemed peaceful at first glance, but the previous night's events were far from over. The fence along the east pasture had clearly been tampered with again. Wire cutters had done their work, leaving jagged edges and snapped posts. My brother Eddie, still recovering from his PTSD flare-ups, had found it first. He looked shaken, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured to the damage. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Eddie. I've got this, I said, trying to mask the frustration rising in me. The sight of the vandalism ignited a fire I couldn't ignore. I walked slowly along the damaged section, examining the tracks. Deep tire marks indicated someone had driven through intentionally, probably late at night. That's when I noticed a faint glow from one of the motion-activated trail cameras I'd installed after the first trespassing incident. I walked closer, confirming the camera was still intact, but had captured some movement. My instincts, honed from over 20 years as a sheriff, told me this was no ordinary prank. It was deliberate harassment. Later that afternoon, while repairing the fence with Eddie's help, I reviewed the footage on my laptop. The video was grainy but unmistakable. Trevor Worthington, riding a bright red Yamaha ATV, tearing through my east pasture at 2:17 a.m., revving the engine, spooking my horses, and taking what appeared to be measurements and photos of my barn and equipment shed. My blood boiled. This wasn't random vandalism. It was coordinated, methodical, and personal. I called Deputy Martinez, a young officer I had personally trained. Martinez, you need to see this, I said. He came quickly, and as he reviewed the footage, his eyes widened. Sheriff, they've been planning this, he muttered. I nodded grimly, realizing how far Stella and Trevor were willing to go. The next day, Stella herself showed up, accompanied by Trevor. They approached Eddie while I was checking the irrigation line near the barn. Stella's expression was haughty, her designer heels clicking against the gravel. Oh, I just wanted to speak to your caretaker, she said, her tone dripping with feigned concern. Eddie looked confused and a little intimidated, so I stepped forward, removing my hat. Actually, you're speaking to the owner, I said calmly but firmly. Stella blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but quickly recovered. She held out a hand, offering a folder with documents. We'd like to make a generous offer for the ranch, she said, her words measured. I shook my head. My brother and I are not selling. This ranch is our home, and we're not going anywhere. I replied. Her face hardened slightly, and she leaned in, lowering her voice. You might want to consider the legal consequences of refusing. There are ways to make this inconvenient for you, she threatened. I felt a cold resolve settle in my chest. I knew she was attempting to intimidate me, but she didn't realize that I had the training, the experience, and the authority to protect what was mine. I glanced at Eddie, who nodded silently, trusting me. Later, I decided to take more proactive measures. I called in Janet Morrison, a certified real estate appraiser, to conduct a court-ordered evaluation. I handed her the trail camera footage, and she carefully documented the pattern of trespassing and the damage caused. Her report confirmed what I already suspected. The Worthingtons' tactics weren't just morally wrong. They were legally questionable. They were trying to manipulate family court claims, using their son Trevor's custody battle as a shield to pressure me into selling my property. By the end of the day, I had a clearer picture of the situation. Stella and Trevor weren't just entitled. They were dangerous, cunning, and resourceful, but they underestimated me. As I walked along the fence line, checking every post, every wire, I formulated a plan. I wasn't going to fight blindly. I had the law on my side, years of tactical experience, and the tools to gather undeniable evidence. And most importantly, I had the determination to protect my ranch, my brother, and our home at all costs. The sun began to set, painting the pasture in shades of gold and amber. I stood atop the hill near the barn, overlooking my 50-acre sanctuary. The piece of my land was worth fighting for, and I was ready to make sure no one, not even an entitled HOA president and her scheming son, would take it from me. The next morning, I was walking along the east pasture, inspecting the damage again. The broken fence posts and tangled wires still lay scattered, a stark reminder that the Worthingtons weren't backing down. Eddie followed quietly, his PTSD making even this small disruption stressful for him. I knelt beside the twisted wire, running my hands over the snap posts, thinking, who would go to such lengths to harass someone just to steal property? It didn't take long for me to review the footage from the trail cameras I had installed after the first incident. The night sky was dark, the moon barely illuminating the pasture, but the cameras captured everything. Trevor, driving a red Yamaha ATV, cutting across my land at 2:17 a.m., revving the engine to spook the horses, and circling around the barn and equipment shed. On subsequent nights, he returned, this time with surveying stakes and measuring tools, methodically marking my land. Every shot, every detail confirmed premeditation. I called Deputy Martinez, a young officer I had trained myself, and went over footage. He watched, shaking his head. "Sir, they're trying to build a case against you before you even have a chance to respond," he said, eyes narrowing. I sighed. That's exactly it. But they don't know who they're dealing with yet. Later that afternoon, Stella decided to escalate personally. I caught her walking past the edge of the barn, clipboard in hand, her designer heels clicking faintly on the gravel. Eddie spotted her first and tensed, thinking she was there to confront him. Stella stopped a few feet away from the fence, glancing at Eddie with a sly, almost mocking smile. "I just want what's fair for Trevor," she said, voice calm but calculating. I stepped into view, cowboy hat on, hands resting lightly on the fence post. "Marcus Bridgewater, ranch owner and sheriff of this county," I said, my tone even but firm. "This land isn't for sale, and your son has no right to be here without permission." Her confident expression faltered slightly, and I noticed a flash of recognition. She had no idea who I really was until now. Stella attempted to recover her composure. "I'm just trying to negotiate," she said, offering a fake smile. "Surely, we can come to a fair agreement?" I shook my head. "No agreement, no negotiation. Trespassing is trespassing, and I protect my family and my property." Trevor hovered behind her, clearly frustrated, muttering under his breath about market forces and developing the land. I ignored him, focusing instead on the subtle cues. Stella's clipped tone, her controlled posture, the way she held her clipboard like a shield. Every action screamed entitlement and manipulation, but I knew better now. They underestimated me because they didn't know I'm not just a rancher, I'm the sheriff. After a tense exchange, they left, and I walked the property line with Eddie, checking the pasture for further damage. The main irrigation line had been tampered with, a small act, but one that carried a clear message. Hydraulic shears had been used, the clean cuts visible on the irrigation pipes. This wasn't teenage joyriding. It was professional sabotage. I called Sarah Rory, my trusted forensic technician, to inspect the damage, and she confirmed my suspicion. The Worthingtons had hired someone with knowledge of the irrigation system to maximize damage without leaving obvious evidence of intent. Eddie watched me set up additional cameras and motion sensors, a mix of relief and anxiety in his eyes. "We're going to be okay, right?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "We're fine, Eddie. We're always fine. Just need to be smarter than them, and we are." By sunset, the ranch was calm again. Horses grazed peacefully, The barn stood proud against a fading orange sky, and the pasture, though damaged, remained ours. I couldn't shake the feeling, though, that the Worthingtons would escalate again, but I was ready. I had the advantage now, and the next move would be mine. The sun was just peeking over the rolling hills of my ranch in Johnson County, Texas, when I stepped outside to check on the east pasture. My eyes immediately fell on the damage. Broken fence posts, tangled wire, and the main irrigation line severed in 3 places. Eddie's voice, low and uneasy, called my attention to the mess. He'd been out there before me, inspecting the devastation, and I could see the strain in his posture. PTSD had always made him sensitive to sudden disruption, and this deliberate sabotage had clearly shaken him. I crouched down, brushing the debris aside with my hands, taking in the professional precision of the cuts. These weren't random acts. They were carefully planned. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were targeting. I grabbed my phone and checked the trail camera footage again. Sure enough, Trevor Worthington's red Yamaha ATV appeared on the frame at 2:17 a.m., revving its engine and spooking the horses. He had returned on multiple nights, sometimes with surveying equipment, marking boundaries and taking notes as if he were planning to claim every inch of my property. My blood boiled, but I remained calm for Eddie's sake. I knew that losing my temper wouldn't help. Later that morning, Trevor appeared at the main gate, pretending to be concerned. He leaned against his truck, smirking just enough to be infuriating. "Looks like someone's been busy," he said, gesturing to the damage. "Need some help fixing this?" His tone was oily, and I could smell the deceit behind every word. I knew better than to trust him. "No, thanks," I said evenly, keeping my voice low. "We've got it covered." He hesitated a moment, then leaned in slightly. "You know, every time something like this happens, it's just market forces pushing the property. Eventually, everyone has to move aside." That line chilled me. He wasn't talking about chance. He was talking about a systematic attempt to push us off our land. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe deeply. "You'll need a court order before you get anywhere near this property," I replied firmly. After he left, I called in Sarah Rory, a forensic technician I knew from a previous investigation. Within an hour, she was on site, examining the irrigation system and fence. Her initial findings confirmed my suspicions. Hydraulic shears have been used on the fence and irrigation lines. Professional-grade tools, operated by someone who knew exactly what to target. This wasn't teenage mischief. It was calculated sabotage. Sarah noted the tampering of the trail cameras as well, which reinforced the idea that Trevor and the Worthingtons were using their resources to cover their tracks. By mid-afternoon, I had begun coordinating with Deputy Martinez, my trusted colleague, who was stationed nearby. I explained the situation in detail, making it clear that we needed to document everything carefully. "We're dealing with professionals," I said, "and they underestimate us because they don't know I'm still on duty as sheriff when it comes to protecting my property." As the sun began to dip behind the ranch's rolling hills, I walked the property line with Eddie at my side. The smell of fresh-cut hay mingled with the faint aroma of diesel from the irrigation pumps. The damage felt like a personal attack, but it also lit a fire within me. I knew that protecting this ranch wasn't just about property. It was about preserving Eddie's sanctuary, our legacy, and the peace we had worked so hard to maintain. By nightfall, I had formulated the next steps. Bobby Hutchkins, a civil engineer I trusted, would help design a collapsible bridge at the usual ATV crossing point. It would support light loads but fail under heavier weight, just enough to control an accident without causing serious injury. Meanwhile, I had compiled all the footage, Sarah's report, and witness statements from nearby ranchers fed up with the Worthingtons' antics. Everything was coming together. I looked over at Eddie, who was quietly feeding the horses, and felt a surge of protectiveness. "We're not backing down," I said, almost to myself. He glanced up, nodding. I knew he understood. This fight wasn't just for the ranch. It was for our dignity, our right to peace, and the very definition of justice on our land. I never imagined that owning a peaceful ranch could turn into a war zone. After Trevor's latest stunt, I realized this was no longer just about property. It was personal. My brother, Eddie, was shaken. PTSD flared up with every sound, every sudden movement, and now he couldn't even feel safe on his own land. I promised him I would protect this place, and I would do it smartly. The first thing I did was call in Bobby Hutchkins, a civil engineer I'd known since my early days in the sheriff's office. Bobby was a genius when it came to structures and safety engineering. I explained my plan. We would design a collapsible bridge over the irrigation ditch, something that looked normal and sturdy but would fail under excessive weight, not to hurt anyone seriously, but enough to stop Trevor and any accomplices from trespassing recklessly again. Bobby understood instantly, nodding as he sketched diagrams on his notepad. While Bobby worked on the bridge plans, I reached out to Angela Martinez, Trevor's ex-wife. She was honest and scared of her ex's manipulative tendencies. Angela provided me with crucial documents, court records, police reports, even medical records showing past injuries Trevor caused intentionally. She confirmed everything I suspected. Trevor didn't want the ranch for his kids. He wanted it for money, for development, for exploiting the land. A luxury cabin project, wedding venue, glamping site. It all made sense now. They had been planning this for months, trying to pressure me with fake concerns about child custody. I also called 5 neighboring ranchers, good folks who had been quietly frustrated with the Worthingtons' harassment. They agreed to serve as witnesses if needed. Their support wasn't just valuable for the legal side. It gave me the morale boost I needed. We set up cameras, recording devices, and evidence collection kits around the property. Everything had to be perfect. Every potential trespasser, every hint of sabotage had to be caught on tape. Eddie watched cautiously as I explained the plan. "This isn't about hurting anyone," I said, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's about protecting our home, our land, and our peace. You don't have to worry anymore." I could see the tension in his shoulders slowly relax. This was our sanctuary, and we weren't going to let anyone take it from us. Days passed as the bridge was constructed subtly, blending into the ranch's usual infrastructure. Every element was carefully engineered. I double-checked all trail cameras and recording equipment. Trevor and his crew didn't suspect a thing. They assumed they were still in control, still thinking they could intimidate me. Little did they know, they were walking straight into a trap. By the time Stella made her final desperate offer of $3.7 million in cash, I already knew her threats meant nothing. They were confident because they had unlimited resources. Or so they thought. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't reveal that I was sheriff yet, but I was ready to act. I had law enforcement on standby, and the bridge was ready to enforce our boundaries in a controlled, non-lethal way. I watched from the barn loft at dusk as Trevor approached the irrigation ditch on his ATV. His accomplice behind him. The night was clear, the air cool, and every sound was amplified. My hand rested on the radio, ready to call Deputy Martinez. Everything was set perfectly. I breathed in, feeling a mix of tension and satisfaction. Justice wasn't about violence. It was about strategy, evidence, and patience. Tonight, all the planning would finally pay off. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was for Eddie, for the ranch, for every rightful landowner who had been bullied by entitled people like Stella and Trevor. They thought they could intimidate a sheriff with wealth and fake sympathy, but they underestimated the law, and they underestimated me. I double-checked the cameras, the bridge, and the surrounding trails. Every angle was covered. Trevor's actions were predictable, and we had prepared for every contingency. The final confrontation was about to happen, and I would make sure it ended with the truth exposed, the trespassers caught, and the ranch secure. Justice doesn't always come quietly, but it always comes to those who are patient, prepared, and willing to defend what's theirs. Tonight, Trevor and Stella were about to learn that lesson the hard way. By the time Saturday evening rolled in, I had every detail in place. The ranch was quiet, the golden sunset casting long shadows across the pastures, and Eddie was inside the barn, tending to horses, completely unaware of the trap we had set for Trevor. I double-checked the collapsible bridge over the irrigation ditch, engineered to hold only light loads, and ensured all recording devices were functioning perfectly. My plan was precise, controlled, and completely legal. I knew every inch of this ranch, every fence post, every irrigation line, and every approach Trevor might take. As night fell, the sky turned deep indigo, and I positioned myself in the barn loft, night vision binoculars in hand, ready to monitor the property without being seen. I could hear the occasional distant call of cattle and the wind rustling through the trees, but the silence was otherwise perfect. From this vantage point, I had a clear view of the bridge and the eastern pasture where Trevor and his accomplice would inevitably try to cross. I adjusted the camera angles on my tablet, ensuring nothing could go unnoticed. A few minutes later, headlights appeared from the gravel road leading into the ranch. Trevor arrived in his red ATV, accompanied by a burly man in work clothes, clearly confident in his knowledge of heavy equipment. Trevor slowed as he approached the ditch, glancing around as if to check whether anyone was watching. I could hear him muttering, "Let's just get this done, no need to make it messy." The accomplice followed, carrying tools that hinted at the sabotage they were planning. My heart raced with anticipation, but I remained calm, silently observing every move through my night vision. Trevor's ATV crested the small rise leading to the bridge. I saw him glance down, his eyes widening slightly as the weight of the bridge shifted under the combined load of him and his machine. Just as planned, the bridge began to collapse in a controlled manner. Trevor was thrown forward, landing in the shallow irrigation ditch with a splash, his ATV tipping on its side. The accomplice tried to intervene, but the collapse stopped the path short, forcing him to retreat to avoid injury. I immediately radioed Deputy Martinez, who was strategically positioned nearby. Within seconds, he moved in to secure Trevor and take control of the scene. I descended from the loft calmly, making my way toward Trevor as he sputtered and struggled his feet, soaked and bewildered. The burly accomplice was apprehended quickly by Martinez, and Trevor could only stare at the reality unfolding. The ranch remained serene around us, horses grazing, the barn doors gently swaying the wind, and the soft chirp of crickets. Yet the sense of justice was palpable. Trevor had underestimated me, unaware that I wasn't just a ranch owner, but the sheriff who knew every trick in the book. Moments later, Stella arrived in her luxury SUV, her designer heels clicking against the gravel. She looked from the collapsed bridge to her son, then to the gathering deputies, and finally to me. Shock and disbelief painted her face as she realized the gravity of the situation. She tried to demand action, shouting that I had set a trap and that her son was simply conducting a legitimate property assessment. But Deputy Martinez stepped forward, calmly declaring the area a crime scene and taking charge of the investigation. Stella's team and the media crew she had called arrived just as the final pieces fell into place. Cameras rolled, lights flashed, but the atmosphere remained calm, professional, and controlled. I stepped forward, removing my cowboy hat and identifying myself as the county sheriff. "This ranch is protected," I said, my voice steady and authoritative. "Any further attempts at harassment or property violation will be met with the full force of the law." This ends tonight. The gathered crowd, including neighbors who had come to watch, murmured in awe as the Worthingtons' plan unraveled before their eyes. Trevor, drenched and embarrassed, was handcuffed for trespassing, and his accomplice was taken into custody. Stella, realizing her schemes had failed, could only watch in horror as her entire operation collapsed. The ranch stood serene and untouchable in the background, a symbol of justice and preparation, with the soft glow of the setting sun casting a golden light across the fields. By the end of the night, the Worthingtons had no choice but to face legal consequences for their harassment and attempted land grab. My brother Eddie remained safe, the animals undisturbed, and the ranch, our sanctuary, secure. It was a hard-earned victory, not just for me as sheriff, but for the idea that knowledge, preparation, and integrity could triumph over entitlement and deceit. The night closed with a sense of calm victory, and I knew that any future attempts to challenge this land would meet the same unwavering resolve. Justice had been served, and the Worthingtons' arrogance had been humbled in full view of the community. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this wild HOA showdown, hit like, share with your friends, and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life ranch and neighborhood stories. Don't miss our next episode where things get even crazier. Turn on notifications to stay updated. Every view helps us bring you the juiciest, most intense property battles out there.